Aloha Mai Kako, thank you for joining me. Today we'll be reviewing the PSAT 8-9, not the digital version that we'd be taking on bluebook, but the paper version that College Board published. Okay, but before we begin, I'd like to start with a joke. Did you know Albert Einstein was the world's first rave party host? Yes, he was known as MC squared. Thank you. Thank you. All right, let's jump into this review, guys. Okay, so this is the new PSAT. Each section, each module rather, has 27 questions, I believe. And we're allotted 43 minutes. The first math module is basically pretty standardized. The second math module, however, will be adaptive. Obviously, these are not going to be adaptive, but these are just the practice questions that are published by College Board. Please also note we can use Desmos calculators on every question on this test, so I'll be showing you how to use some of those tools as well. Okay, so let's get started. Question one. Question one is, how many yards are equivalent to 612 inches? So you're told the conversion formula right here, and that 612, 1 yard is 36 inches. So basically, if we're going from inches to yards, yards is a bigger unit of measurement, so we'll need less of them. So we're going to take 612 divided by 36. Okay, so here's my calculator on the side, 612 divided by 36, and I get an answer of 17. So the answer is B. Okay. If we wanted to get a little fancier, we could set up a proportion. A proportion would look something like this. Yards, we could do inches to yards. I like to start my proportions with words just to keep me on track. There are 612 inches to how many yards? Well, that's what we're trying to find. Let's call it X. And the conversion, which is listed right here, there are 36 inches to 1 yard. Notice the 1 goes on the bottom, okay, with the yards. So at this stage, hopefully, my target audience is Algebra 1 students. So hopefully you remember you can cross multiply. So you'd have 36x equals 612. To isolate x, we divide both sides by 36, which is what we did earlier. And the answer is still on the left. 612 over 36 is indeed over here 17. So the answer is B. Okay, next question. The table gives the results of a survey of 200 people who were asked how often they see a movie. How many responded? So all this is a simple count. How many responded never or almost never? These are these two categories here. And so how many people? You would just add those two up. And we have 53 plus 29, which is 82. The answer is C. Okay, next question. What's the y-intercept of the line graphed? How nice of them, they labeled these axes. We have the x-axis here, the y-axis here. And so the y-intercept is where the line intersects the y-axis, and it does so right there. That location is 0 x value. The x coordinate is 0 and the y coordinate is 8. So that brings us to D. Okay. 4. I am going to first show you how to solve this using Desmos. Okay. Desmos can solve any equation for you very quickly. Obviously, this can be solved algebraically, but I do want to show you how to do this on Desmos. So the first thing you're going to do is enter the equation exactly as you see it. However, you will need to turn variables. For example, in this example, it's P, but we need to turn that into X. The reason why is because in Desmos, it is a graphing calculator as well. It graphs things on an XY plane. Okay, so we're going to do 5x plus 180 equals 250. Notice we've just entered it exactly as we see it. Notice nothing appears. So what we have to do, Desmos is going to be kind of small when you open it on PSAT. You got to zoom out a little until you see something, and there it is. It is a vertical line, which is what we would expect. The equation of this vertical line, if you recall, is x equals some number. In this case, it's x equals 14. We also see that the x-coordinate of that x-intercept is 14, and we were solving for x in the Desmos calculator. So x equals 14, the correct answer is A. Okay, let's suppose we were, just to solve this algebraically, which everyone is free to do, just be really efficient. Remember, Desmos can solve things a lot quicker sometimes. We're going to subtract 180 from both sides. We got 5p equals 70, and after you divide by 5, you will get p equals 14, okay, which is the same answer. Good. Next problem. What is the area in square centimeters of a rectangle with a length of 36 and a width of 34? We can draw the rectangle. This is not the scale, but this might be 34. This is 36. Obviously, length and width are interchangeable in this case. The formula for the area of a rectangle is base times height, or length times width, however you memorized it. So we're just going to take 34 times 36 on Desmos, which is your only calculator that you will have. So get used to it. 34 times 36 is 1224, which is D, and that will be in square centimeters. Okay. All right. Next question. There are 170 blocks in a container. So if you imagine if I just drew a container and if this represented 170 blocks, of these blocks, 10% are green. So this portion and below, which might be roughly 10% of the whole container, is green. So how many blocks in the container are green? Well, we would want to take 10% of 170, okay, of the total. And we see that if we just rearrange these, the wording of this, 10% of the blocks, 10% of, which is always multiplication in math, the blocks, 170, are green. So this expression right here should tell us how many green blocks there are. You have to remember, whenever you're using percentages in an equation, you have to turn this into a decimal. You move this decimal 2 times to the left, 1, 2. So you have 0.10 times 170, which is 17. You can also confirm that with your calculator right here, 0.1 times 170, and that gives you 17. Okay, so the correct answer here is 17. Are green. Next, the equation gives a relationship. So we're given an equation with 2 variables, one equation and 2 variables. If you're given no other information, we cannot provide a unique solution. And the best we can do is express one variable in terms of the other. However, they do give us the value of one of these variables, which is a equals 9 already. So what we do here is 46 equals, we plug in and we plug this 9 in for that a in this equation. There is no more a. I sometimes see my students plugging in the 9 of the left of the a, sometimes the right of the a, but just remember, guys, 9 is the a equals 9 in this case, okay? So a is replaced by 9 plus 2b, and this will allow us to solve for b, which is what they're asking for. So we have 46 equals 18 plus 2b, and we could obviously plug this into Desmos as I showed earlier, but we can just solve this by hand. We're going to subtract 18 from both sides. This gives us 28 equals 2b, and divide by 2, b equals 14. Okay? All right. Next. I like this question. It can be done a couple ways. Students often ask me about this, so here's what I would say on this. The graph shows the possible combinations of the number of pounds of tangerines and lemons that can be bought for $18. Okay, so the one thing to keep in mind is you have a budget of $18, and every location on this graph, every combination limits you to $18. Okay, so since we're limited to $18, what we want to possibly find out, some students like to find out, including myself, how much does 1 pound of tangerine cost? Okay, so if you take a look at this point right here, this point represents 9 pounds of tangerines and 0 pounds of lemons. Okay, why is it 0 pounds of lemons? Because this point corresponds to here, which is 0 pounds of lemons if we look on this axis. Okay, so you're buying only tangerine tangerines here at this location, and how many? 9 pounds. And you spent $18. That implies that tangerines are $2 per pound. Okay, because you spent $18 for 9 pounds. Similarly, you can find out how much lemons cost by looking at this location, which represents purchasing only lemons and no pounds of tangerines. Okay, so you can buy 18 pounds of lemons for $18. That obviously implies that the lemons are $1 per pound. Now, in this question, if you purchase lemons and 4 pounds of tangerines for $18, okay, how many pounds of lemons did one purchase? Like I said, when students kind of read this, they want to know how much tangerines cost because they bought 4 pounds of tangerines, but they want to know how much they spent on the tangerines. In other words, they need to know how many dollars per pound. Luckily, we already found that. We found that it's $2 per pound for tangerines. Okay, so for 4 pounds of tangerines, that would require $8. And that would leave us $10 to spend on the lemons. Okay, and lemons are $1 per pound, which tells us we spent 10, which tells us we bought 10 pounds of lemons. Okay, because lemons cost $1 per pound, and we have 10 more dollars to spend between these two. Okay, so the correct answer is B. Now, that's a long way to go about thinking about this problem, but here's a different way. Remember, all these combinations represent spending $18. And so all we have to do is look 4 pounds of tangerines on this graph, 4 pounds of tangerines, right there. And that corresponds to 10 pounds of lemons, which is the answer there. So we can also use the graph for the information that we need. Question number 9. The area of a square is 64 inches squared. So I'm just going to draw a square, not necessary, but the area is 64 inches squared. What is the side length? Again, the squares are rectangles. The area of a rectangle is base times height. In this case, though, the base and the height are the same, so we can call it S if we want. The area is S squared is 64. And so the question is, what is the side length? The answer that goes in there is 8. 8 squared is 64. So the correct answer is A. Okay, and there it is. Next question. Okay, I think sometimes one of the trickier things for students is to set up a comparison. So what I like to tell my students is to draw a bar graph. Connor has 4 times as many dollars as Maria. So if I had to represent that, Connor has this much money, and that's 4 times as much money as Maria does. So Maria would be down here. Okay, so this is accurate. Connor has 4 times as much money as Maria. All right, so together they have a total of $25. If I were to set up a system of equations, okay, I don't have to solve it, it's just asking me to set up. C is the number of dollars Connor has, M is the number of dollars Maria has, so we would say C plus M is 25. This represents the money Connor has up here. This is plus the amount of money Maria has is 25. Notice A has that, B has that, C does not, D does not. So we can start eliminating some bad choices here. This is wrong, this is wrong. Okay, so of these two, which is the correct answer? Notice all that this depends on is this comparison. This can be very tricky, but if you look at the graph, you can start out with a false equation that sometimes helps. C does not equal M. The amount of money Connor has doesn't equal the amount of money Maria has yet, but we can make them equal. How? By multiplying this side, which is smaller, by 4. Okay, and that leads us to the correct answer of A. Okay. All right. Moving on. Next question, number 11. In this question, we have distance and time. This should recall, if you've learned this very important formula relating these, distance is equal to rate times time. Okay? Distance is equal to rate times time. So in this equation, they're asking what is 16 represent? Okay, this 16. Well, if distance is equal to rate times time, and we have d is equal to 16 times time, then 16 is the rate of travel. Okay, so we are looking at this one. The object is moving at a rate of 16 inches per second. The correct answer is C. Now, please note, I do want to stop and pause for just a moment. The object moved a total of 16 inches. This is true, okay, if 16 is inches per second and t is in seconds, which it is. However, they're not asking you about the expression of 16t and what it equates to. Okay, B is a true statement if the rate is 16 inches per second. They're specifically asking what is 16 represent. Okay, so while B is a correct statement, that is not the answer we're looking for, okay, because it doesn't really reveal what the significance of 16 is. That's how we get to C. Okay, next question. Scatter plot. Temperatures go up and down according to days since June 1. Which of the following time periods did the greatest increase in recorded temperature? Looking at the graph, the greatest increase in recorded temperature occurs right up in there, okay? Right up in there, and that is between a time of 2 to 3. Okay, so the correct answer is C. All right, next question. 112 furlongs, and we're told 1 furlong is 220 yards. So what we're going to do is take this 112 furlongs, and we're going to convert it to yards first. And then after that, we're going to convert it to feet, because we want to know how many feet there are. All right, so in 112 furlongs, there are how many yards? Well, 1 furlong is 220 yards, so 112 furlongs must be many more yards. So we're going to take 112, and ignore this. This is just the label furlongs. And we're going to multiply it by 220, so 112, go on Desmos again, times 220. That will tell us 24,640 yards. And we know there are 3 feet to a yard. It's also told us right there. So we need to multiply that in turn by 3 times 3. And you can keep the calculation going. If you look on the left, we're at 112 times 220 times 3, which is 73,920 feet. Okay. All right. Next question. Function notation. This is, I think, one of the trickier problems, I believe, in this practice test. What makes this a tricky problem is it goes past, it's a couple step problem. I think what would make this a simpler problem is if you were given this and they ask you solve for m. Okay, so knowing that hopefully makes the problem a little simpler, because we know we got to go through that intermediate step first. We have to solve for m. How would you recognize that? Well, in function notation, if you've studied that, again, I'll kind of assume you have at least been exposed to it. This is an example of a function, a complete function in function notation. How this works is, let's say we have f of 10. All right. This is the name of the function, f. This, in parentheses, it looks like multiplication, but it's not. It just identifies your variable. Your variable is x in this case, okay? So when we're asked to find f of 10, what we're doing is we're plugging 10 into the f function, okay? Plugging 10 into the f function for the x. So we would put in 2 times 10 plus 3. And we could evaluate this, and it would be 23. So f of 10 is 23. Okay, notice you might be wondering, what does it have to do with the problem? It's just an example. Okay, so then the utility of this notation is that we're allowed to say it's much more condensed. It tells us the x input and the y input at a glance. Okay, if we input a 10, we get out a 23. For example, if we plug in x is 10, if x is 10, comma, y is 23. Notice that takes a lot more writing than this, which is the handiness of function notation. Now, I also drew this up in order to show you there is a distinct difference between this, which is a complete function, and j. J is missing information. It, of course, tells us x is the variable, which is right here, but we don't have the value for m. which is what makes this problem a little tricky. That's why we can't just jump to plugging in j of 10 in this case. Okay, just like we did f of 10. We just plug in a 10 into the x. There's no more x. It goes in for the x, and we just have a number. We can't do this because we don't know our value for m, hence we need to find it first, okay? So the only information they give us is this, j of 12. So we plug in j of 12, which represents m times 12 plus 144, okay? Notice, technically speaking, that is true. You're going to plug in a 12 for this x, and it goes right there. The m still hangs out on the left of it. However, this doesn't look very standard, so what we want to do is switch this around. Makes it look a little more conventional, and so we have 12m equals, 12m plus 144. That is j of 12. Now, you can't do anything with this until you realize they tell us j of 12 is equal to 18. Aha. Okay. Now, this is a complete equation with one variable, and it will allow us to solve for m. Okay. I'd like to just show you how we can use Desmos again. Obviously, we can solve this by hand, algebraically, but I just want to show Desmos again. Plus 144 equals 18. How quickly Desmos can give us an answer. You see a vertical line, you just got to zoom out sufficiently far. We have an x value because it solved it for us. This x value, though, is really the m that's missing in this equation, the unknown variable in this. Okay, so my m is negative 10.5, as you can see on the left. Negative 10.5. Now, that was a challenge in and of itself to understand all that. But what we need to do now is you take this value for m, you plug it in there, and that will give us a complete equation for j of x. Okay, so this is negative 10.5 x plus 144. Notice now we have the value for m. Now we can plug in and evaluate j of 10. Okay, j of 10. So we're going to plug in a 10 in for that x. Negative 10.5 times 10 is negative 105 plus 144. That gives us 39. Okay, which is the right answer on this open-ended question. Next, I want to show you, I'll show you how to do this algebraically first. First off, this is a given, this is a system of equations. The easiest way to solve this system of equations is through substitution. Okay, this is why, since y is equal to 19 in equation 2, wherever you see a y, you can replace it with 19. Okay, so this is kind of like plugging 2 into equation 1. So we have 19 equals 4x minus 9. If you solve for x, you would add 9 to both sides. So you have 28 equals 4x, and you have x is equal to 7. Now, they're asking what is the solution as an ordered pair. Obviously, we have x is 7. There's a 7 here, but that's in the y value. And so the correct answer is B. Okay, 7 comma 19. Let me show you how to do this on Desmos. Basically, if you're given any system of equations, what you want to do, what you can do is you plug it into Desmos exactly as you see it. Okay, you will likely see two, in this case, it's two lines. In general, you might see two curves, so to speak. And remember, the solution to a system of equations is where these two lines intersect. And notice that's at 7 comma 19, which is the answer B. Okay. All right, 16. I do want to show you how to do this algebraically and on Desmos as well. This we recognize is a difference of squares. Okay, this is a binomial, quadratic binomial, and it is a difference of squares. Difference of squares are always factored like so, with a plus sign and a minus sign in between. If you've studied a little bit of this, that automatically eliminates this and this. These are both wrong. Okay, A and C are wrong. Now, the difference between B and D is the numbers. So we want to keep in mind when you multiply a binomial times a binomial, your teacher may have taught you FOIL, which is first, outside, inside, last. Okay, first. So by multiplying these first, that's this one and this one, we need to get 256w squared. If you take 8w times 8w, that's 64w squared, which is not 256w squared. So the right answer is D. Okay, so we would select this one. It is D. Now, if I were to explain that fully, 16 times 16, you can check on your calculator over here. 16 times 16 is 256. So if you did the first, you would get 256w squared. Please notice the outside here, and this is important to see, the outside, which are these, with the sign, that's 26 times 16w. And the inside, which is the next set you need to do, that's negative 26 times 16w. One's positive 26 times 16w, one's negative 26 times 16w. They will cancel each other out because you will add them at the end. And so the outside and the inside in this case cancel out. And we just have the last, which is this times this. And 26 times 26, or 26 squared, is 676, which is this that we're shooting for. Okay, 676. All right. Now, suppose you didn't know any of that and you wanted to use Desmos to assist you. So this is a bit educational, I hope, and I want to show you how Desmos is very handy in this case. What you can do here is you're going to enter the original expression, 256w squared. You can't use a w though, again, because we're on Desmos, it plots on things on the xy plane. So you're going to enter this as you see it, 256x squared minus 676. At this point, it's about finding, you're going to leave that graph up there. As you can see, it is a polynomial. You're going to leave that graph up here, and you're now going to enter these expressions as you see them, A, B, C, and D. Okay? Basically, we're trying to find what's exactly the same. So if we graphed A, I'm going to choose A right now. This is minus 26. And times 16w, and in this case x, minus 26. I will have this curve, and as you can see, the red curve, which is the original, and the second curve, which is in blue, they are not the same. If they're not the same curve, then they're not the same expression. They're not equivalent, okay? So A is wrong. Please note, if you know what you're doing on Desmos, you don't have to know how to do this problem. You don't even know how to do, you don't need to know how to do FOIL in order to get the correct answer. You don't need to know how to factor in order to get the right answer. All you need to know is know how to use Desmos, and that's quite powerful. Okay. Instead of going to B, I would plug in C. Okay. Why? Because, I'm sorry. Instead of going to B or C, I would plug in D because there's less to change. All I need to do is change this second minus sign to a plus. And if I do that, bang, you can turn the graph on and off. You will see that these graphs are exactly the same. Okay? And if the graphs are the same, then the expressions are equivalent as well. Just to show you another thing, B is close, possibly, but it is wrong. I will show you very quickly. 8x minus 13 times 8x plus 13. It is close, okay? If you don't look close enough, okay, I'm zoomed out quite a bit. There's the red, there's the green. They look identical. Don't be fooled. Try to be super careful and zoom in very, very tight to this graph, okay? You will see that there's clear separation between these two graphs, that they are not equivalent. They are close, but they are not equivalent, okay? What's close about them is they have the same x-intercepts. They will have the same x-intercepts, but other than that, they are not equivalent, okay? If you zoom out far enough, you might be able to see, yes, there's clear separation if you zoom out below. Okay, all right. So that's how you can use Desmos to solve questions that you might not even know how to solve by hand. All right, 17. By the way, that I'm just circling that because that's what I was testing. The right answer was D in this last problem. Okay, this is a parabola, which is not that important. They're just asking which table corresponds to this graph. One of the most distinct parts about this graph is this point down here, which is 3, negative 12, an x value of 3 and a y value of negative 12. If you look at these choices on tables, only C has that, 3, negative 12. No other table has that. So the right answer is C, and you could pretty much move on. Okay. The rest are just details, possibly meant to distract you. 18. Line K is defined by y equals 3x plus 15. If I were to sketch this very briefly, 15 is up there. I know there's no scale, but we have a slope of 3. This is y equals 3x plus 15, which is in slope-intercept form. Okay, y equals mx plus b. So b. The slope in this case is 3. Okay, I'll jot that down. The slope of this line is 3. And line J is perpendicular. So perpendicularity is about perfect crosses. And line J, it's perpendicular to this line, which is line K. And so it doesn't tell you where it is. It's just asking for the slope of line J. This is possibly what line J could look like. Okay. And the first thing we want to notice is the slope is negative. This eliminates nothing because all these slopes of these choices are negative. And if you need to recall from your Algebra 1 class, the slopes of perpendicular lines are opposite reciprocals of each other. So if you took 3 and wrote that as a fraction, it would be 3 over 1. If you took the opposite reciprocal of that, opposite, so it's negative, which we discussed, this line J has a negative slope. Opposite reciprocal of 3 is 1/3, which brings us to the answer of A. Please note also, this is the slope of this line 1. It's close to 0 because it's kind of flat. And slope is rise over run, rise over run. Let's just take the negative out of the picture. We know the slope is already negative. Rise is 1, run is 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that's how you create perpendicular slopes, by finding slopes that are opposite reciprocals of each other. 19. Yogurt. Total sales is $1,277.94. That appears here. This equation has to do with money, okay? Because it's about sales. This is a figure that represents dollars. X is the number of small containers, okay? Now, which is the price of a small container? We want to look for what's associated with the X. Okay, so if X is the number of small containers, then this is the price next to it. Because if we had one small container, if we plugged in a 1 there, it would cost us $5.48. If we plugged in 2 there, which is the number of small containers, we would have 5.48 times 2, which implies that each small container costs $5.48. So which of the following represents the price of each small container? $5.48. It's not D. That's the price. That's how much money we would spend on small containers. This is asking for the price of each small container, which is just the 5.48 by itself. Okay. All right. This is close, but that is how much we spend on small containers total. Number 20. A right rectangular prism that would look like this. Okay. This is not the scale. But it is 28 by 15 by 16. Okay, and we're asked what is the surface area. Read this carefully. We're not asked for the volume. We're asked for the total surface area. Well, surface area just involves these. If you look at any one given face, it's a rectangle. Okay, so what we have are 1, 2 identical rectangles. 28 by 16. This front face is 28 by 16. Okay, 16. The back face is 28 by 16. We have the left and right faces, which are 15 by 16 each. And we have the bottom and top, which is 28 by 15 each. Okay, so over here, I might do 28 times 15. Let's calculate the bottom, top, bottom and top. These are each 420, so the total surface area is maybe 840. Okay, bottom and the top. Let's go left and right next, left and right, which are these faces, which are 15 by 16. Next calculate. I deleted, but you could leave it. It's 15 times 16. Okay, which is 240 each, but we have 2 of them. So let's just double that. So we have 480. Okay. And these are all in centimeters squared, And the only other calculation is we have bottom, top, left, right, front, back. front and back. Okay, and these are both 28 by 16. 28 by 16, which gives us this number 448. I'm going to multiply it by 2 in my calculator, so that gives me 896, okay, centimeters squared. So what's to find the total surface area, we got to take all of these and add them. So we've got 896 centimeters squared plus 480 plus 840, which gives us 2216, okay, 2,216 centimeters squared. This is open-ended. What is the surface area? You would enter this number 2216 because they already give us the label. Okay, 21. 21 I think is a really challenging question. The thing to remember is we don't actually have to solve this to get the answer. And that's kind of important to realize. The answer is irrational. For Alg 1 students, you would need to use the quadratic formula to find the answer here. I will show you two shortcuts. One on Desmos, okay? Actually, let's do this algebraically first, and then we'll solve it on Desmos. The thing to realize with this question is we have x squared minus 6x, and we're asked to find the value of x squared minus 6x. Typically, this requires us to find a value of x first, then plug it in. However, there's some consonants between x squared minus 6x and 3x squared minus 18x. If you look at all these numbers, the clue is they're all divisible by 3. So what you would do is you would divide the left side and the right side of the equation by 3, which you can do because it's an equation, okay? We don't need to factor it and make something equivalent, although we could. We just divide by 3 because it's an equation. On the left side, you'd have x squared minus 6x, which should sound familiar, x squared minus 6x, x squared minus 6x. But you also have this hanging minus 5, okay? Now, at this point, you might realize, hey, they're asking for x squared minus 6x. I have x squared minus 6x here, so all I would need to do is try to isolate that, which is not the way to solve quadratic trinomial equations, okay? So don't be confused though, but in this case, we are going to add 5 because they just want x squared minus 6x, and the answer is 5. Okay, now, how would you do this on Desmos? Let me show you. The first thing you're going to do is just enter the equation as you see it, okay? What Desmos will do for you is give you a value for x, 15 equals 0. Now, there are two solutions. That makes sense because it's quadratic, which sometimes has two solutions, and it is that one and that one. Notice we'll just take one of them, okay? I can take the other one though, but it's x is roughly 6.742. Please note that is not an exact equation. That's not an exact number. That's a rounding. Okay, that's an approximation from an irrational number. Excuse me. What we're going to do is we're going to take this value and we're going to evaluate x squared minus 6x. So we're going to take in parentheses 6.742 and we are going to square it. Entering this on Desmos, you don't need that, but I will soon do a negative number in a bit. Minus 6 times that same value of x that you have here, 6.742, and that will tell us 5 point blah, blah, blah. Now, don't be confused there. Why is that not exactly 5? Because the answer for x is not exactly 6.742. That's an approximation. So you might approximate the solution to this to be 5, which we already established. Okay, which is exactly 5, by the way. The right answer is exactly 5. The reason why Desmos isn't saying is because we approximated. The other solution for x is the other solution for x was negative 0.742. Okay, so what you would do, you could have entered that one as well. Negative, but make sure you use parentheses. Negative 0.742 minus 6 times negative. I could have just deleted that. Negative 0.742, and you get the same answer. So as you can see, it doesn't matter which value of x you plug in. It will be evaluating the expression x squared minus 6x will, in this case, be the same. Okay. All right. Next question. You can use Desmos for this, but for the sake of time, I am just going to show you how to do this by taking this and foiling it. But to do it on Desmos, you would first change the d's to x's because it needs to go into Desmos. And after that, you would see which of these is equivalent, okay? Which has the exact same graph. But I'm going to do FOIL, which again stands for first, outside, inside, last. If you multiply those, we'll have 8d to the third. I'll do the inside next, actually. If you multiply these, you'll get minus 48d squared. Okay, and then if you do the outside, which are these, okay, because I already did the inside, minus 3d. And if you do the last, which are these guys, you have plus 18. Please notice this expression is right here. Okay, so the right answer to this is C. Okay. Moving on, 23. A right triangle. Once you hear right triangle, you might think area, or you might think the Pythagorean theorem. So in this case, they are asking for the hypotenuse, which does involve the Pythagorean theorem. To scale, it would look like this. This is 20, this is 28. We are trying to find this. The hypotenuse is opposite the right angle. It is also the longest side of a right triangle. Please note, one of these solutions is obviously wrong. Two of them are obviously wrong. H cannot be D. It's not 1,184. That's way too long, considering this is drawn roughly to scale of 20 by 28. Okay, we would approximate this to be maybe low 30s, okay, if we had to use our estimation. C is definitely not right either. These would have to be on a straight line, 20 and 28, to have the hypotenuse be 48. Okay, the 20 and the 20 plus 28 is 48, that's why. So C and D are not the right answer. Okay, so we have to use Pythagorean theorem here, which is a squared plus b squared equals c squared, where c is the length of the hypotenuse, a and b are the length of the legs. Okay, so notice it's not saying a plus b equals c, it's a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So 20 squared plus 28 squared equals h squared. Okay, in this case, h's are unknown. Over on the calculator on the left, you can do 20 squared plus 28 squared, which is 1,184. And this is equal to 8 squared. But we want, mind you, we don't want 8 squared, we want h, the length of this hypotenuse. So what we have to do is undo squaring, which involves the square root. 184. I'm just rewriting this to show the step. We're gonna square root both sides, which gives us h on the right, and the answer appears on the left, 1184. Now, if you know how to simplify your roots, great. This might take a while doing it by hand, but what we have here is Desmos. Remember, Desmos is a calculator. It can help you do calculations. The square root of 1,184 is 34.4. That makes sense. H is roughly 34.4. Okay, H is, H is about 34.4 centimeters. Okay, and you look at these choices and neither of them are 34.4. You're wondering which of these is equivalent to 34.4. So that's when you use your calculator. 8 root 6 has a value of 19.59. That is not 34.44. So it must be the other one, and that's 4 root 74, and which is 34.4. Okay, so the correct answer of these is B. Okay, and that's how you would solve this. If you wanted to simplify this by hand, obviously I know what the answer is, so I know square root of 16. The square root of 1,184. The square root of 1,184 is divisible by the square root of 16. Okay, I know that just because I know the answer, but you divide this by 16. So you would break this down, 16. You would break this down into square root of 16 and the square root of 74. The square root of 16 simplifies to 4 without the square root symbol. Okay, so it's 4 root 74, which is what leads us to this correct answer, B. Okay, all right, next. One way you can think about this question is mean as a balance point. Mean is synonymous with average, and this is a balance point. Here's what I mean by that. No pun intended. Let's say I scored a 90 on a test and a 94. Okay, if you took this on the number line 90, 91, 92, 93, 94. Okay, if you scored this and you scored this, your balance point is right there, which is 92. Okay, that is the concept of average. It is a balancing point. Okay, so if you look at these options B, okay, the balancing point of all this, you scored, you basically took 24 tests. You can think about that as 24 tests. You have 6 70s, so 70, 70, 70, 70, 70, 70. And other tests, you scored 80. How many times? 6 times. Okay, comma, 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 comma. And you scored 86 times, etc., etc. And you had 6 90s and you had 600s, perfect scores. Your average would be the balancing point, which is the middle. Okay, the mean of this set without calculating it is, we can call it X bar. The mean is 85. Okay, the mean of C is also 85. You could see that because these average out to 85, and the number of 70 test scores and the number of 100 test scores also balance out. The middle of 70 and 100 is 85. So your average test scores for all of these, if you thought of them as test scores, is 85. Same thing here. These average out. You have 580s, you have 590s, that averages out to 85. And these on the outside wings will average to 85 because you have the same number of 70s as you have as 100s. And the middle of 70 and 100 is 85. So the average here is 85. And the question is, which data has the greatest mean? It can't be B, C, or D because they have the same mean. So the answer must be A. The reason why it's A is because, look, you scored more perfects, 700%, okay, 7 times frequency, 700%, but you had 4 tests that were kind of low. You only had 4 tests that were kind of low. So your average of this is actually higher than 85, okay? So the right answer to this is A. All right, next question, 25. 25, I'd say, is a pretty tricky question. If you did this on Desmos, let's say you were planning on doing this as quickly and efficiently as possible, you would go 8x plus 7y equals 9. You will get a diagonal line. Okay, that is the equation of 8x plus 7y equals 9. And then you would just enter the other one, 24x plus 21y equals 27. Now, you would expect a different line and the solution would be where they intersect, but you might be a little confused when you see this and you said, hey, where's the other line? Well, they're the same line, okay? They coincide with one another, and algebraically speaking, you can see why that is. If you took equation 1 and multiplied it by 3, left side by 3 and the right side by 3, you would get 24x plus 21y equals 27. These are exactly the same equation, okay? Now, that means that their solution, there are infinitely many solutions where they intersect. That's not to say that that any given point is a solution. That's totally different. Okay, we're not saying that any point is a solution. We're saying there are infinite solutions of a certain nature. What is that nature? As long as they lie on the line, which is what I'm pointing to on the left. As long as they lie on the line. XY pairs that lie on the line. Okay, to prove that, I can just easily show you 5 comma 5. Notice on the graph it's in empty space. 5 comma 5 is not a solution to this. If you plug in a 5 for x and a 5 for y, you would get 40 plus 35. That's 75, which does not equal 9. It doesn't make the equation true. Okay, so not every number is a solution. Not every ordered pair is a solution, but there are infinite solutions of the nature as long as they lie in the line. So to determine what the actual solution is, you would probably want to consider A or B. C and D, I would not choose. The reason why is because these, I guess, how would I explain it? The reason why it's A and B are you either make your x value, you either choose your x value and give it a variable. Once you select your x value, the y value is based on whatever you chose as your x, okay? Or alternatively, you could have chosen a y value and the x value would have been dependent the x value would have been dependent on the y value that you picked. It would have been determined. Okay. These are just some kind of hodgepodge of one another, and I would not choose those. So to check A, you would plug in an R for X right there. Okay, R for X. So that's 8R plus 7Y equals 9. And all we're doing here is solving for the corresponding Y, okay, which would go in here. How you do that is you would subtract 8R from both sides. I'm going to change the order over there on the right. So I have 7y equals negative 8r plus 9. Sign travels with the term. I'm going to divide by 7, and I will have y is negative 8r over 7. I'm just writing in the format that they have, plus 9 over 7, which is choice A. Okay. Now, if that's confusing, it could be. It's a challenging question. What that is akin to is taking this equation and saying, hey, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick any x I want. Let's suppose I chose a 5, okay? And I'm going to then find the corresponding y. So I'm going to do 8 times 5 plus 7y equals 9. How I'm going to find this y is I'm going to minus 8 times 5, minus 8 times 5, which is 40. But I just want to show you in that language, I'm going to do negative 8 times my x value, which I choose. In this case, it's times 5. But negative 8 times my x value that I choose. Okay, and I have a plus 9. And then at the end of the day, I'm going to divide both sides by 7. Okay, so I have negative 40 plus 9 over 7. Negative 40. If my y value were 5, that's obviously a point in space, but if my x value were 5, my y value would be negative 31 over 7, okay, which is it's about negative 4, a little less than negative 4. And I can see on my graph there, if I plug in an x of 5, I get a y value of negative 4.429. So I'm just showing you what we were doing, why the answer is A. It's about picking any given x value and finding the corresponding y value that is determined. Okay? All right. Moving on. I would say that's a pretty challenging question on the test. So is 26. 26. A salesperson's total earnings consists of a base salary of X. So that's how much you earn just for showing up to work, plus commission. A commission is always it's always a proportion of what you sell. Is 11%, but when you're working with equations and expressions, it should always be turned into a decimal. 0.11 of times the total sales. Okay. Now, where is sales? That's S. If you look later in the problem, that's S. Okay. And this expression represents all the money you've made. This is your base salary, and this is your commission. It's 11% of whatever sales you make. Okay. So this year, the salesperson has a goal for the total earnings, which is this expression right here, to be at least, this meaning more than, greater than or equal to, 3 times, and at most, meaning less than or equal to, 4 times the base salary. Base salary was X. And I know this is getting crazy. There's lots of variables, but it's going to be at least 3X, because that's base salary, and it's got to be less than 4X, 4 times base salary. Now, what are we trying to do with this expression? Which of the following represents all possible values of S? We are taking this compound inequality and solving for that guy right there, which is your S. Okay, the way we do that is we're going to subtract X from all these 3 parts. So we get 2X is less than or equal to 0.11, S is less than or equal to 3X. And to get S by itself, we would divide everything by 0.11, 0.11, divide by 0.11. So you have 2X on the as your left endpoint, S, which is which of the following inequalities represents the possible values of total sales, S, total sales. And this is 3X over 0.11. This corresponds to the answer B. Okay, and that is also a rather tricky question. Okay, last one for module 1. A number A is 70% less than the positive number B. Okay. And the number C is 60% greater than A. The number C is what times B? Um, there are two ways to do this question. One way is to pick some nice round numbers. The other is to create some algebraic expressions. If I were to show some nice round numbers, you might say A and B. That's the first comparison. A is 70% less than the positive number B. Suppose B were 100. A is 70% less than that, less than 100. Okay, 70% less than 100, which would make A 30. Okay, if it's 70% less than, it's 30% of. Okay, so this is basically saying A is 30% of B. Okay, because A is 70% less than B. Now, number C is 60% greater than A. So if you need a calculator, you're trying to get a value of C, and it's 60% greater than A. So you got to take this A, 30, and you got to increase it by 60%, which is plus increase 0.6, which is 60% times 30. This is equivalent to 1.6 times 30. Okay, if you followed that, but I could just do this pretty straightforward, plus 0.6 times 30. That's 48. Also, if you did 1.6 times 30, it should also give you 48, which it does. So C is 48. And here's the question. C is, okay, so C, which is 48, is how many times, that's what you're trying to find, how many times B, which is 100, sorry. I'm going to take that out and replace it with 100. Okay, so it's basically, you're finding this variable, which is how many times of B is C, and C is 48. Okay, so what you're going to do is to solve for X, you're going to divide both sides by 100, and so X is 48 hundredths, which is 0.48. Okay, and the answer is 0.48. Okay, another way you can do this is to kind of choose, create algebraic expressions and equations. So equation one, I might say is this. A is 70% less than, that means it's 30% of B. Okay, that's equation one. Equation two is the number C is 60% greater than A. So C is 1.6 times A. Now, what could you do with this? Basically, we need C in terms of B. C in terms of B. That's what I was asking. C is how many times of B. So you would do a substitution. Please note this is equation 1 into 2. That's one way of thinking about it. Because 0.3b is equal to A. So wherever you see an A, you're going to plug in 0.3b. So 0.3b, which is equal to A, will go in right there for A. So you're going to write basically equation 2, which is C equals, C equals 1.6, and instead of writing A, you're going to write 0.3b. 1.6 times 0.3 is 0.48b, and which tells you the answer. Because it's asking you C is how many times B, basically what times B. It's 0.48 times B. That's why this is the answer. Okay, so that is module 1 of the math section. And if you have any questions, feel free to type it in the chat. If you saw any errors or misspoke, I apologize. I was just going a little fast. You can put that in the chat as well. Okay, let's begin module 2. You can always ask your teachers too if you have questions. Let's do module 2. There are 20 buttons in a bag. Okay, so you've got this bag. You've got 8 whites. I'll just say 8 whites. You have 2 orange, and you have 10 browns. 10 browns. Okay. If one of these buttons is selected at random, so this is probability. What is the probability of selecting a white? Probability is defined as the number of desired outcomes. Probability. Basic probability is number of desired outcomes over the total number of total possible outcomes, number of total possible. Okay, so we're looking for white. So there are 8 white, number of desired outcomes, and there are 20 possible outcomes because there are 20 buttons. So the right answer is 8 over 20, which is B. Okay. Notice they don't need to simplify it, and that's very kind of them. You might have seen answers. They could have made these answers not out of 20. We would have maybe need to reduce this, divide top and bottom by 4. So we'd have 2 out of 5. Okay, which is 40%. It could have also been a decimal too, but that's how we do that question. 2, an employee prepares sandwiches. All right, so they take 46.1 minutes. Notice all of these are 46.1, meaning all of these equations are time. They're related to time and they're in minutes. Okay, minutes. All right. Now, it takes an employee 1.5 minutes to prepare a sandwich. X is the number of sandwiches they're preparing. So the total time it takes them to make sandwiches is 1.5 times the number of sandwiches. Okay, 1.5 times the number of sandwiches, which is right here. 1.9, which is the time for a salad, times the number of salads is how much time total. 1.9y is the time total they take to prepare y salads. Okay, and so the right answer in this case is B. All right, okay, moving on. And that's just a matter of taking a written expression and turning it into equation. The pens, black to red, I like this as a ratio. I always start mine with words. The ratio is 8:1, and we're going to focus on this. And there are 40 black pens in a box, and we want to find out how many reds. If you remember from your algebra, if you focus on this, one way to solve this is to cross multiply. So you have 40 equals 8x. After you divide by 8, you get x is 5. What does x represent? X is the number of red. And that's what they want, red pens. So the answer is A. Okay. Oops. And moving on. So it's 5. Back to function notation, which we did in part 1, one of the earlier questions. Notice they want the value of f of x. They're not telling us f of 9 when x is 9. So all we're going to do is we're going to plug 9 in there. So 100 times 9 is 900 plus 2. So we've got 902. Okay. So that is the right answer, and that would be D. Next. The length of a white whale is 162 centimeters when it's born, and it increases at an average of 4.8. This is basically slope-intercept form, where this is the y-intercept, which this is like age, this is length, and it goes up like that. Okay, it starts at 162 at birth when it is 0 in age, and every year it goes up 4.8 centimeters, every month for the first month, where x is in months. Okay, and y is the length, so we're just kind of building this equation, and so that's why the answer, if you change the order of these, the right answer is D. Okay. All right. It starts at 162. To explain this equation, it starts at 162 and increases by 4.8. This doesn't start at 162. That's what's wrong with this. This is wrong because it doesn't increase at 162. And this assumes that when the baby was born at 0 months, it was 0 centimeters in length, which is not true. Okay. All right. 6. The perimeter of an isosceles triangle. The definition of an isosceles triangle is where at least 2 sides are congruent, or I've heard where exactly 2 sides are congruent. Depends. But that is an isosceles triangle. The perimeter, which is the measure around, you get by adding up all the sides, is 83. Each of the 2 congruent has sides 24 inches, and we need to find this length of the third side. Okay, so x plus 24 plus 24, which is x plus 48 equals 83. If you solve for x, you got, after subtracting 48 from both sides, minus 48, you get x is 35, okay, in inches. So that would be how you record this open-ended answer. Okay, next question. If 2 plus x equals 60, what is the value of this? One way to do this is to get an explicit value of x from this equation and then plug it in. We're just evaluating, finding the value of it once we have a particular value of x in mind. So if we did that, we would see x is 58, and we're going to evaluate 16 plus 16 plus 8 times whatever my x is, which is 58. Notice there is no more x. X is 58. Oops. X is going to be replaced by 58. So you would get 480, which is the right answer. Another way to confirm this is you might realize there's some consonants between 2 plus x and 16 plus 8x. What we're basically doing to get from 2 plus x to 16 plus 8x is you're going to multiply this by 8. So if you had 2 plus x equals 60, which is your starting point, if you multiplied the left side and the right side by 8, you would get 16 plus 8x, which is the expression we are trying to solve for, 16 plus 8x, 16 plus 8x, and that would be 480, okay, which confirms your previous answer. Okay. Another way, a good way to set this problem up is with a proportion. Population is 290 people per square mile, so we have people per mile squared. Okay, I always like my proportions with words. There are 290 people per 1 square mile. Worthington has a population of 92,800 people, which is why I put it on top. And we need to find out the number of square miles. Okay? One way to do this, again, is to cross multiply. You're going to multiply this times this and set it equal to 290 times x. So you have 290x equals 92,800. Okay, and you divide both sides by 290 and work on your handy dandy Desmos here. You have 92,800 and you divide by 290 and you get an answer of 320. 320 what? Square miles. Okay, which is the answer C. Okay. Next, the y-intercept. There was a problem in section 1 similar to this. The y-intercept is where the graph intersects the y-axis, and it's right there. That is 0, comma, -6, 0 for the x-coordinate, -6 for the y-coordinate, which is choice A. Okay, nice. Moving along. 10. We want to find out the number of candy bars per second. Okay, number of candy bars wrapped per second. What that really involves is finding the slope of this line, which is the change in y, number of candy bars per second. Okay, if we take change in y over change in x, we'll get candy bars per second. One point to look at here of significance, there are many, but I would look right there maybe. Whoa, right there might not be bad. That would be about 1 second, and that's 40 candy bars per second. You could also look up there too, that's 80 candy bars, but for 2 seconds, which averages to 40 candy bars per second. Okay, according to graph, what's the estimated number of candy bars per second? And that's why the answer is 40. Okay, that would be B. All right. Number 11, right triangle. All right, one of the acute angles is 51. That would be this one, possibly, because it's opposite the longer side. And what do we know about this angle? What's the measure of the other acute angle in degrees? Is 51 degrees. So we remember all the angles in a triangle add up to 180. Okay, so this plus this is 180, but this is already 90. So that means this plus this is 90. So 90 is equal to 51 plus this unknown angle x. And so x has to be, after you subtract 51 from both sides, x is 39, which is B. Okay, good. Moving on. I think my highlighter transferred to a bunch of these. Oh, okay. So the mean is synonymous with average. What you could do is you would add up all these numbers and divide by the number of numbers you have. So 2 plus 9 is 11. 11 plus 14 is 25. 25 plus 23 is 48. And 48 plus 32 is 80. And how many numbers I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I would divide by 5, and I have 1, 6. Okay, so the average is 16, the mean, which is synonymous with average. I want to show you on Desmos over here. That's pretty cool, handy dandy. It will find you the mean. You just type in mean. Notice it went from italics to standard letters, normal letters. And so that means it understands the input as a command of finding the mean of these. Okay, these do not need to be in any order whatsoever, comma, 23, comma, and 32. And it tells you the mean is 16, which is why we went with B. Another thing to keep in mind on Desmos it can also find you the median. And it need not be in the right order, but median is if you arrange the numbers from least to greatest. Excuse me. It is the number in the middle, or if there's two numbers in the middle, you would find the average of those two. In this case, it's 14. So please note, it will find you the median as well in case you happen to forget what mean and median are on the test. 13. F of x is defined as this. F of 36, we've kind of talked about function notation on one of these. The x value is 36, so we're plugging in 36 right where we see an x. The 6 plus the square root of 36 is another 6, so the answer is 12. Okay? All right, next question. On Desmos, I'll show you how to do this by algebraically first. Equation 1, equation 2. The thing is, we don't need to find a value for y, which is what we typically might do if we saw this, and we plug in the y here and get an x. We typically do that because what they're asking for x. However, we should see there's a connection between this 3y and this 3y. And 3y, according to equation 2, is 11. So if we rewrote equation 1, we would have x plus, instead of writing 3y from equation 1, we would just write 11. Oops, equals 29. Which tells us x is, after you subtract 11 from both sides, 18. Okay. Notice this can be confirmed with Desmos, how you can solve any system of equations, again, by plugging it in exactly as you see it, plus 3y equals 29. You will have a line. The solution is where these two lines intersect, 3y equals 11, and we want the x value only. You might be wondering, oh, I see the two lines, but I don't see them intersect. You have to zoom out, you've got to move, and it tells you your x is 18. Okay, which we already stated. Okay. Number 15. On a car trip, Rhett and Jessica each drove. The total distance they drove was 220. Was under 220. Notice 220 appears here, 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 and here. So these are distances. All of these. Okay. Inequalities represent distances. All the quantities represent distances. So we might want to remember the distance is equal to rate times time. Okay. Rhett's rate is 35, Jessica's rate is 40. Okay. So what is R? R is the time in hours that Rhett drove. So according to this, we need rate times time. We need Rhett's rate times Rhett's time. So this is Rhett's rate times Rhett's time. Okay. Obviously, C and D are not right. Okay, we would eliminate those because they switch Rhett's speed, which is 35, with Rhett's time, which is the R. Okay, that's not 35R. So these are both in the right ballpark. What makes A wrong is that this is greater than, they drove under 220 miles, which tells us the answer is B. Okay, and notice they also take Jessica's rate, which is 40. Jessica drove at 40, and Jessica's time, where J is the number of hours Jessica drove. That's rate, that's time. Okay, so the answer is B there. Okay. Next, 16. Which is the equation? So all of this is just setting up the problem. What's most important about this is they're asking us to express C in terms of B and F, meaning get C by itself, and you can see that. Okay, so if you weren't sure what they're asking, they're just asking you to get C by itself from this equation. So to do that, let's say I wrote this like that. Okay, because it is all multiplication on the right side of this equation. It's all multiplication, and they can be rearranged. To get C by itself, you would divide both sides by 42F, divide both sides by 42F, and so you get C equals B over 42F. Okay, because all of this stuff, 42F over 42F cancels out because it's equal to 1. Okay, anything divided by itself is 1. So that's what leaves us C by itself. Okay, 1C. And B over 42F is the right answer, and that would be choice A. Okay, B over 42F. Okay, next. This is actually a system of equations that needs to be solved. It can be solved by hand. I think it's very short question. It seems a little straightforward, but it's quite complicated in terms of one needs the skill of solving a system of equations. So here's what we would do. Since I know I'm eventually going to plug it into Desmos, since I know that, I'm going to use X and Y as my variables. Um, Typically, you might want to choose P and C because that should remind you of potatoes and celery. But I'm going to choose X and Y just for convenience, but I will make a key establishing what these variables represent. X is the pounds, number of pounds, number of pounds. How do I know that? Because that's what the question will be. The question often helps us determine what the key is. Number of pounds of, and I'll make X potatoes. And then Y will be the number of pounds of, Y will be the number of pounds of celery. Okay, now in terms of building the equation, potatoes cost 0.69 per pound, so 0.69x plus 0.99 times y, however many pounds of celery I end up purchasing, y, number of pounds that I end up purchasing, I need to multiply by 0.99 because that's the cost per pound, and I would have spent 534 in total. This is my total expenditure. This is equation 1. Equation 2 is a comparison right here. Bought twice as many pounds of celery as potatoes. So again, you might want to draw a graph here. This is C, which is, oh, sorry, Y, which is pounds of celery. Okay. And you bought twice as much celery as you did potatoes. So potatoes will live down here, and this is your X. This second equation is, hopefully you see that this graph makes it much easier to write a comparison statement. Okay, y doesn't equal x, it does not equal x, that's false, but if we simply doubled the x, we would get that true. So the number of pounds of what is y? Y is the celery. Celery is 2 times the potatoes, okay, in terms of how much we bought. From here, I'm going to use Desmos, okay? I can solve this by hand, but maybe I'll show that after. I'm going to have 0.69x plus 0.99y equals 5.34. And here I'm going to have y equals 2x. So setting up, once you set up the system of equations, you just enter it on Desmos and I'll solve it for you. Notice that gives you a ordered pair of 2, 4. Now, what is the 2? 2 is potatoes. The number of pounds of potatoes. That's where this key comes in handy. This is potatoes, pounds of potatoes. And 4, this must be pounds of celery. What is it asking for? How many pounds of celery? So the right answer is 4, D. Okay. Now, if we were to solve this by hand, the gist of it would be this. Since y is equal to 2x, you're going to take this 2x and plug it in wherever you see a y. Okay? I will show you how this is done by hand. I'll try to do that quickly. So rewriting equation 1 up here, I would have 0.69x plus 0.99 times, instead of writing y, I'm going to write 2x equals 5.34. This is 0.69x plus 1.98x equals 5.34. Okay, simplifying the left side, I have 2.67x equals 5.34. This assumes that x is 2. What does x stand for? The number of pounds of potatoes, but that's not what they're asking for. They want celery. So you're going to take this x and plug it in right there and solve for y. So the y is 4, which is the pounds of celery. Okay, which confirms the answer is D. Okay, moving on. They want the closest possible for slope. You can use any 2 clear-looking points in your mind for slope. For me, I don't know, that looks pretty close, and I'm just scanning along, scan. You could choose this point is pretty close, or this point, okay? So note, if we went from here to there, okay, the rise is -3. Why? Because I'm going down, because I'm choosing to, and the run is 4. So this is roughly, it's roughly -0.75, -3/4. The only number close to that is C. Okay, A and B are wrong because that can't be the slope. This slope is clearly negative, so it's between C and D, and the slope of that line drawn above is not -7. That would be quite steep going like this. And so the right answer is C. Now let's suppose we use these other points, this one to this one. Let's say we want to move up this time. The rise would be 5. The run would be from here. I'd go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The run would be 7, but it's negative because it's going to the left, and negative 5 over 7. So on my calculator, I'm just going to ignore the negative because I know it's negative 5 over 7. Sorry, 5 over 7 is 0.71. And if I attach the negative to it, this is roughly negative 0.71, which again leads us to the answer C. Okay. 19. All right. So acorns fall, and there's some ants in it. Okay, X stands for the number of worker ants. That's really important. This equation holds true on a certain domain, a certain portion of the line. Okay, I'll show you how to use Desmos on this in a couple of ways, but Y is the number of larvae. Okay, so that's important to keep in mind. X is worker ants, Y is larvae. If one of these colonies has 58 worker ants, this equation is valid because X, which is the worker ants, falls between 20 and 110. That's what this is saying, as long as it's valid. So 58 goes in for the X, which is the number of worker ants. X is worker ants. So you plug in the 58 there. So you take your calculator, you go 0.67 times 58, okay, plus 2.6. And you get an answer, 41.46. And the closest to that is A. Okay? So I want to find Y, number of larvae. Y is equal to 0.67 times 58 plus 2.6, which I evaluated over on the left with the calculator. Okay, I'll leave that there. We could have also graphed this equation, y equals 0.67x plus 2.6. And what we want to do is find the y, because that's what it's asking for, number of larvae, which is y, when x, worker ants, x is 58. So I'm going to go on this graph and I'm going to trace when x is 58. I zoom out a little. You can touch it and move it when x is 58. Y is roughly 41.46, which is why we chose A, 41. Okay, so that's how you can use this graph too. This graph is, these are on the x-axis worker ants, and on the y, the number of larvae that you would expect to see on average. Okay, number 40. Almost there, guys. What number, so that's our variable, is equal sign, 40% as a decimal, that's 0.4. Sorry. Okay, we need 40% greater than 115, so we are going to take 115 and increase it by 40%. One way we can do that is take 115 plus 40% of 115. Okay, the formula for percent increase or decrease is original. The new amount is the original, plus in the case of increase, minus in the case of decrease. The percent, this has to be a decimal, increase or decrease, times the original. Okay, which is why I'm doing 115 plus, because it's increase, because it's 40% greater than 115. And this is the 40% of 115. Okay. So this portion of the problem represents 40% of 115, and I want to know what percent is 40% greater than plus 150, greater than 115 as your starting point. So on my calculator, I would do 115 plus 0.4 times 115, which gives us 161. Oops, 161, which is the right answer. Another way to get that is, if you want 40% greater than 115, another way is to take 1.4 times 115, okay? Because you want to increase it over 115, so you're going to multiply it by a number greater than 1. In this case, it's 1.14. I'm sorry, 1.4. So you take 1.4 times 115, and you also get the number 161. Okay. All right. For the values of j and k, the ratio of j to k is 11 to 12. That's not to say j is 11 or k is 12, but they have the ratio of 11 to 12. If j is multiplied by 17, okay, multiply this by 17, you will get a number 187, I believe. There's a trick to that. You split the 1 and the 7 and you put their sum in the middle. So yeah, but 17 times 11 is indeed 187. Okay, if you multiply j by 17, you have to multiply k by what to maintain the same ratio? Well, you've got to multiply this by 17 as well. Okay, so the right answer is 17. You're multiplying k by 17. And that would be, of course, let's see, if I were to prove that, 12 times 17, you would have 204. This, if you multiplied k by 17, you would get 187 over 204, which is, oh, I don't know if Desmos is going to give me the simplified version of the fraction, but 187 over 204. It's that, and a notice 11 over 12 is the same value. Okay, so that's what would need to happen. What you do to the top, you must do to the bottom. Okay, so the answer is 17 here. Bit of a strange question. Okay, so this function's output, okay, is the predicted value. I think that's what we need to keep in mind for this question. It is the predicted value X years after he purchased it. Okay, so f of 8, if they're telling us f of 8 is 82, this f of 8, first of all, is the x, that's the x right there, which represent years after Emmanuel purchased it. Okay, so A has no sense of 8 years after. Okay, this has no sense of 8 years after. Only C and D involve 8 years after. Okay, 8 years after. The only difference is this. This says it's increased by $82. This says the value is approximately $82. Remember, the output tells you the predicted value. Yeah, it is the predicted value. It's not an increase in predicted value. It is the predicted value. The predicted value. Okay, which is why the correct answer in this case is D. C is fairly close, but no one talked about how much it increased by, which could be an interesting piece of information, but we're not talking about the increase. This function gives us the value of the coin at a certain time after purchase. Okay, value of the coin after a certain time of purchase. Okay, last few guys, 23. 23 is asking for, we've got a table of x values and y values. Okay, n is just a constant. What is the slope? Slope is defined as change in y over change in x, which is y2 minus y1, doesn't matter, those sub-values x2 minus x1, as long as you don't change the order. So let's suppose I took this top one minus that one, that's n plus 92, change in y, that's y, minus n, over change in x, which is -3 minus 0. Notice these n's would cancel up here, so that leaves me 92 over -3, which is the answer right there. The answer is A. Okay. Notice if you went the other way, if you did n minus n plus 92 in parentheses, over 0 minus, this is the change in x now, 0 minus a -3, okay, because you need 0 and you're going to minus because that's in the operation of slope right here, okay. You would get the same answer. You would get n, if you distribute this negative right here, you would get n minus 92 over 0. Subtracting negatives like adding a positive. That's 0 plus 3. So you have -92, since these n's will cancel, -92 over positive 3, which is still -92 over 3, which is answer A. Okay? All right, 24. 24 is a really interesting question. If you look at the formulas, let's see if I can get to them real quick. You will be told the formula for the volume. There's another question coming up for the volume of a cone. That's important to remember as well. So we're going to need this one soon, and we're going to need this one for our next problems. Okay. So the volume of a right circular cylinder is pi r squared h. The volume is equal to pi r squared h, and the volume of a cone is 1/3 pi r squared h. There's a cool water experiment you can look on YouTube comparing the volume of a cone to the volume of a right circular cylinder that the cone fits in. But those are the two relevant formulas that you will see. Okay. Now we have this right circular cylinder with a radius of r and the height of h. Its volume is pi r squared h. That is the volume of this cone. Sorry, right circular cylinder, our first right circular cylinder. Now, if we had a second right circular cylinder and its volume is 392 times this, v sub 1, okay, which is the new radius and the new height, the new radius and the new height, okay? So if I were to draw this right circular cylinder, it might look something like that. Oh, yeah, a lot bigger, okay? And let's say it had, I'm going to go with, let's just testing out letter A for now. Okay, let's say this is 8r, its y, its bigger, its new radius is 8r, and its new height, let's see if I can make that a little clearer, 8r, and its new height is 7h. The volume of this large right circular cylinder, v sub 2, is pi, but instead of squaring just a normal r, I'm squaring 8r. And instead of multiplying by instead of multiplying by h, I'm multiplying by 7h because I want it in comparison to the other. Okay, so what I have here is, this is 64r squared times 7h. If I rearrange this, this is 64 times 7. 64 times 7, which is 448. I'm taking the constants, putting it out in front. 448. That's this times this. I would still have a pi and an r squared h. Notice the pi r squared h, the pi r squared h is the same. It's just that this v2 has a volume that's 448 times of this. 448 times of that, of pi r squared h, pi r squared, compared to this small one. So 448, I'm not looking for 448, I need 392. Notice the pattern here is you're going to take your r and you're going to square it and multiply it by the new h multiplier, however much bigger your h was. So to test these, I'm going to take 64, because I'm going to square the r again. So that's why I'm getting 64 times 49. I don't need to test that. 64 times 49 is a lot bigger than 392, okay? So I'm going to consider C at this point. Okay, C. So I'm going to take 64. Let's say I drew up the formula. So I would have V sub 3 up here. Okay, is pi, but instead of my R being just R, it's now a 7R. And I'm going to square that. And instead of multiplying by H, I'm going to multiply by 8H. And I'm going to have pi times 49R squared times 8H, which is 49 times 8, 49 times 8, you will see a magical number of 392. This is 392 pi r squared h, pi r squared h, okay? And so notice the pi r squared h is in common, except this is 392 times greater. The volume is 392 times greater. Volume that's 392 times as large. Okay, so the right answer there is C. All right, 2 more questions. Okay, this I thought was a pretty tricky question in terms of how it was worded. They're talking about sides of a 30-sided polygon. So sides, okay, there are 30 total. The number of sides with length. So then they're now introducing this idea of length. There are sides with length 8, there are sides with length 3, and there are sides with length 4. So let's say I have a length of 3, 4, and 8. Okay. I want to know how many sides there are. Now, how would I know that? Well, I wouldn't really, but please note, if you look at these equations, it's all 30. 30 is the number of sides. So what we're trying to do is build an equation with sides. Okay. So number of sides with a length of 8 is 5 times the number of sides n with length 3. So we might come back to that, but there are 6 sides with length 4. There are definitely 6 sides with length 4. Okay, numbers down here will only be sides. Number of sides. and there are 6 sides of length 4. Okay, let's go to centimeters. Oops, centimeters, centimeters, centimeters. Now, how many sides are there of length 3 centimeters? Oh, there's n sides with length 3 centimeters. Okay, and how many sides of there are length 8 centimeters? There are 5 times this number of sides. 5 times this number of sides, so there's 5n. Okay? Now, what would compel us to set this equal to 30? The only way we're going to set this equal to 30 is, since these are the number of sides, there are n sides of length 3 centimeters. I'm going to add it to 6 sides of length 4 centimeters, and I'm going to add it to 5n sides of 8 centimeters in length, and that should equal 30, the number of sides. 30 is the number of sides. Okay, so we're talking about sides, and that is the focus. Okay? And so if you simplified this expression, as weird as that would be, you would get 6n plus 6 equals 30, which is B. Okay? All the others are a little distracting, to be honest. A only takes into account this 5n, this 5n quantity. C is starting to mix side lengths and side numbers, but we're not creating an equation with side lengths and numbers. We want an equation only with the number of sides. The number of sides, okay? And same here, it's confusing side length, well, for example, 4 centimeters and the number of sides with that, which is 24. That's why all those other equations don't really make sense. Okay. Last question, two more questions. Okay, 26 I thought was also a good question. Let's say data set F. Okay, set F. And there's set G. There are 55 integers, and they have values between 170 and 290. They could be any numbers, really, and I could illustrate that with having them all be 170, but just to make things a little interesting, let's say the lowest number, there's two 170s filled with random numbers in between, and the highest number is 280 on both sets. Set G is all of the same, as well as the integer 10. So we'll worry about that in a minute, but this is 280. Let's say, since there are 55 integers here, 55 integers, which are whole numbers and their opposites, but they have to be between 170 and 290, so there are whole numbers between 170 and 290. Since there are 55 integers, there will be a middle ith integer. There's going to be 22 over here. There's going to be 27 at the front. There's going to be 27 in the back, and right smack dab in the middle is the 55th integer, which is the middle one. Okay, and let's say this is a number like, let's just call it 200. Let's suppose the preceding number between 200 was 190. Okay. All right. I might come up with another data set after this, but here we go. Okay. So for set F, the median, which is the middle number, okay, which is what they're talking about, the median is 200. How do I know that? Because I'm saying for 55 integers, for an odd number of elements, for example, 5, there is always a middle one. There's a single entity data in the middle, okay? So that's going to be 200. The median is 200, and the mean is going to be, we're going to add up all these numbers, and we're going to divide by 55, and the mean is, let's just call it X, okay? Now, set G is going to have 56 elements. How do I know that? Because set F had 55, okay? So set G consists of all the integers before, in addition to a 10. So it's going to start 10, and the first two are going to be 170, 170, and filled by a bunch of other numbers. And we're going to have a 190 in and a 200 somewhere in there, and this will continue with these. There's going to be 27 numbers here. There's going to be 27 numbers here. Right, 27 numbers there because we added before the 190. Before the 190, there were 26. So before this, there's 26. But we added this 10. So there's going to be 27 right up to here. Okay. So that adds up to 54, and there are two in the middle. What are the two in the middle? They will be 190 and 200, for example. Okay. For set G, the median is 195. Please notice the median of G is lower. Okay. The mean of set G will also be less than x. The mean for this, it will be less than x. It must be. Why? Because there's this number 10, which brings down the total average. It's like you scoring 170 points on 170 to 280 points, and you scored exactly the same as set F, but you also had a dud of a game where you had the 10, and that's going to bring your entire average down. Okay? Now all they're asking is to compare what is less in F. Is there anything less in F? Reading this the first time, I made a mistake. I thought they were talking about G, but they're talking about F. Is anything in F less? Well, the median of F is greater than this, and the mean of this is greater than this. To answer that point, no. There's nothing in F that is less. Which of the following must be less in data set F? That would be neither 1 nor 2. The correct answer here is D. Okay. That's that question. It's rather tricky, especially how they asked about F going back to the larger case. They're not actually talking about G. Let's suppose in a different example, set F and set G. For simplicity's sake, let's say F consisted of all 170s. How many? 55 of them. Let's say set G consisted of a 10 followed by 55 170s. Okay, so it's 10 followed by 55 170s. So 170 followed by 170 followed by 170, 55 times. For set F, the median of this is 170. Okay, notice it doesn't have to be 170, but this is just fleshing out the problem. These are assumptions that you can make just for generalization. The median is 170. The mean will also be 170, the average. Okay, for set G, including a number 10 will not change the median. It will not change it. Okay, there will be two middle numbers, but they're both going to be 170. You have to imagine that there's a bunch of 170s. So there will be two in the middle since they're an even number for set G. If there's an even number of elements in a set, for example 6, okay, there are always two in the middle. But there's going to be two 170s in the middle, so the median is the average of those two 170s, which will be 170. The median is 170, but the mean is less than 170, less than 170. What I'm doing is I'm just confirming the idea that for set F, which is what they want us to focus on, they're asking, is anything less? Which of the following is less in F? Well, the median is not less, the mean is not less, so it's neither 1 nor 2. That confirms that the right answer is D. Okay. All right, last question. A right circular cone. If you remember from the top, the formula for a right circular cone, for the volume of right circular cone is 1/3 pi r squared h. Please remember, if you look on YouTube, you will find some amazing demonstrations of this. I think you'd really enjoy that. But to follow this through, we have 1/3 pi. If the r is, it has a diameter of 6, so the radius, this is the diameter from one end of the circle to the other. So the radius is half of that, so the radius is 3. And I'm going to square it, and I'm going to multiply by my h, which is 22. Okay, 22, and this is 3. So I'm plugging into this formula. I have 1/3 pi times 9 times 22. If I move the pi in front, because we're not including pi, and we're just solving for this constant n, I will have 1/3 1/3 times 9, which is 3. 3 times 22 is 66. So I have 66 pi. And this will be in centimeters cubed. And that's the volume. Okay, so what are they asking for? They're asking for the volume of n, which is this guy in front of the pi, this guy in front of the pi. So my answer is 66. And guys, that is all of the review. Again, if you have any questions whatsoever, feel free to leave it in the comment. Feel free to email me if you know who I am, or ask your own high school or college teacher or middle school teacher, and they would be happy to help you. And if you saw anything amiss, please write it in the comments below. Thank you so much for your time, and good luck on the PSAT 8-9. Aloha.